the Meskwaki and the Sac migration, and how they came to be in here, your neighbors in Iowa. They come from the far northeast corner of what is the United States of America and into Canada. They were moved. Migration is, I think, a nice term to describe how our federal government moved tribes to locations that they wanted them to live at. And the Meskwaki people did spend some time along the Iowa River corridor, but yet were not intended to stay there, and were moved further south into Kansas and Missouri area. And 4 Meskwaki men decided that, our community does not prefer this land and really prefers the Iowa River corridor. As a woodlands people, whom they are, they wanted obviously to be in an area that felt more like home to them. So those 4 men came back to Iowa, and may come as no surprise to anybody in this room that some kind-hearted European settlers who had enjoyed being their neighbors initially, the Meskwakis' neighbors, offered and accepted offers to sell land to these men. And they sold them 80 acres there along the Iowa River in what is now Tama County. And that began the relationship of this tribe that is our neighbors here in Iowa. The Meskwaki are the Fox of the Sac and Fox. And today, they own roughly 9,000 acres. About 8,000 of that is located in Tama County. The remainder is located in Palo Alto County in northwestern Iowa. But they are the only tribal nation in the United States of America that owns all of their land. None of their land is reserved or ceded to them by the federal government. So, as the director of their Natural Resources Department, I am blessed to be responsible for management of their lands and all of their environmental programs that are intended to interlace their culture, their spirituality, their way of life in their land management, as it's all one to them. Each piece begets another, and that's their relationship with the land that they have had for thousands of years traditionally, and they continue that today. So, a little bit about myself and who I am plays into that responsibility. I am also of Native heritage. I am not Meskwaki. I am Tarahumaran, which is Mexican Indian from the northern mountains of Mexico. My mother's grandmother was sold to her first husband at about the age of 12 or 13. And he worked for the company that was the Southern Pacific Railroad that was building the railroad. She came into California with him. She had children with him. Her husband and children would all be killed from smallpox, and she was covered with smallpox scars herself. And she would then marry a second man, a California Indian, who had been orphaned at a Catholic mission as an infant. And so we don't know our California tribe. I suppose I could do like a DNA thing and try to figure that out. The California tribes were severely decimated in particular, so it may not be a simple process to find that relationship. And I think, frankly, because of assimilation, my family, never pursued that avenue. My mother was raised by her grandparents in California, in the Long Beach and Bakersfield area, with a strong understanding that assimilation meant survival and meant hopefully quality of life, right? So when I see photos of my great-grandparents, my great-grandfather's wearing a suit and a tie, and my grandmother's wearing a polka dot dress, and they're standing next to an old Ford Model A or something, and trying to look as white as possible. It didn't really work, but they sure look like honorable people. So my mom and dad met there in California. My dad was in the Navy during the Korean War. He's a German farm boy from Toddville, Iowa, and they met on a blind date. And I think my mom thought it would be so cool to come to Iowa and see snow and farms, and they would only be here like a year, and my dad was supposed to go back to a job there in the oil fields, and 63 years later, 12 children later, they never made it back. And so I was raised in a multiracial family in rural Iowa. I'm the youngest of those 12 kids, and I would say I was raised in a dynamic home. My mom brought these really progressive ideas from the West Coast and continued to always build on those progressive ideas. And we were expected to, question and think and be independent and argue and find our way with an understanding that we were put on this earth to make this earth a better place and to contribute to society, even when, no matter how difficult. So at a young age, we were always outside because we were not wanted inside. We were always outside playing. I was raised in a what I would call a homesteading setting, raised in horticulture, food sovereignty, small scale agriculture. My first job, actually, I have to do this, my first employers are here, and they became like second parents to me. I worked on the Sovereign Llama Farm from the age of 12 to 17, and I have to say, I always loved being outside, and so myself and Mabel and Alice, two very large dogs, Great Pyrenees, we hung out, shoveled a lot of manure, fed a lot of llamas, and it made me a really good student athlete. I was so strong physically, and I just loved being outside, and I loved that work. I think that would, I was raised with goats and chickens and everything under the sun, and I think that would lead into, me and my love of bison and raising bison, and I've been blessed to have that repeat in my life, strangely. Having my own herd and now raising buffalo for the Meskwaki Nation, which is maybe an odd thing in Iowa, right? So I'm very blessed in that. But so that led me into my interest in the environment, protecting natural resources, conservation management, and working for the Iowa Department of Natural Resources for 18 years. I got to manage your state recreation area. That was wonderful base to my career and who I am. I learned a lot of things the hard way, which is often my favorite way to learn for some reason. And then basically when I left the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, I really needed development, and I needed to get my graduate degree. I needed to manage bigger budgets. I needed to just grow up, frankly, because I was getting too complacent working for the Iowa DNR, and I didn't want to do that for 40 years and retire with this sense of complacency. So I took a risk, and I've been very fortunate in that, had a lot of support from friends and family in that. So regardless, today, as director of the Department of Natural Resources, it's been really a neat experience in that I grew up always going to the Meskwaki powwow. I think that was one time of the year that my mom felt at home. In particular, she just loved going to the powwow and cultural events at Coe College, and I'm the baby, so I was drug along to every political thing she did and every art-related thing she did, and that was very good for me. But we all grew up going to the powwow, and we didn't dance. My mom did not promote that. I think that was although her culture was important in our home, and I would say the primary culture versus my father's German culture. So that they had this interesting, his family settled in the Toddville Palo area in 1838. So 1837 is when the Iowa, the Sac and Fox were pushed out of this area. So as soon as land could be purchased after treaties were signed, my German ancestors came to this area and began farming. I had this interesting clash of cultures in the home I grew up in, and personalities, if you knew my parents. This great deep and love and respect for our natural world around us. And interestingly, I think I probably learned more of that from my German father, because he had grown up so deeply living off the land, more or less, as a child during the Great Depression and so on and so forth. So a very, very interesting contrast, but yet similarity. And as that comes into my work, I have this ability, to some degree, to understand the indigenous culture, which is so important to serving a tribal community, and yet that balance of being in rural Iowa, which is the agriculture capital of the world, essentially. So, although I worked for the Department of Natural Resources and got that good base of land management, managing a recreation area, it's a little different than a state park, because I got to do more land management, which is essentially what I wanted to do. Land management through that agency is very complicated, because as you know, they're very poorly funded. The opportunity of working for the tribe is that I work for a sovereign nation whose partners are federal, not state. So this is a very interesting situation in Iowa. When I look at the tribe's land, I really see it as an ecological island in Iowa. It is, their land management is extremely progressive. I know that I could not manage land in the manner that I do if I was working for a county conservation board or the state of Iowa, for political reasons, quite frankly. I did teach as an adjunct professor at Kirkwood Community College for about 5 years in the Natural Resources program. And I would always tell my students, Iowa is agriculturally controlled politically because of the fiscal power that lies within that. So when you're doing conservation work in Iowa, it may seem futile to some degree. You know, we're not running around at Yellowstone on over 1 million acres. I'm sure that's a very different experience. But I would always impress upon them, think of the impact that you're making, like a little seed in this mass of agriculture. It's a huge impact because of the scale. And so it's so very important, the work that we are doing, and to not give up on it and to keep doing it. So working for the Meskwaki Nation, you know, I don't have to use chemicals doing land management. It's not required of me to do flyovers to spray invasive species in the woods, as other agencies do, as it's a normal practice. That's just one simple example, but yet a huge step toward truly managing conservation in an effective manner for both the earth, wildlife, and humans. So my slides are really rudimentary. I try to just give you some visuals while I'm rambling on, but this is the settlement in Tama, the boundaries of it. Like I said, it's just about 7,800 acres. As you can see, the Iowa River traverses through that area. It is predominantly upland and lowland woodland forests. There is no farmland on the settlement, no agriculture per se, no large scale. The tribal operations is very robust. I'm not sure if any of you have ever been to the settlement or even to the casino. The casino is their primary funding source, of course, but the tribal operations, most folks don't realize that there's tribal government, just like there's state government, city government, county government. Tribal governments are in relation with the federal government through treaty rights and trusts, and that develops those federal partnerships where the federal government is required to support tribes constantly in determining self-determination and sovereignty in all their work. So some of you would remember the Indian Restoration Act, which really created that domestic dependency, as if the tribes are children of the federal government, always dependent, like always crying out for support and help. And we, as a leader for the Meskwaki Nation and the Meskwaki people, now we constantly work with the federal government. I always say that's my greatest responsibility. is constantly reminding our federal partners, that word is so important, that the Meskwaki people are a sovereign nation. They are self-determined to make their own decisions and to lead themselves, with that constant relationship that the federal government, frankly, it's unfortunate, owes them in preserving, retaining, and maintaining that self-determination. And that can be pretty complicated at times, quite frankly. You know, we still meet with resistance to this day in being independent human beings on their own land, which is unfortunate, and I think will go on till the end of time to some degree. So, as I was saying about agriculture, the tribe did farm traditionally, or I would say up until about 2021, the last of the farmland was taken out and put into CRP lease with the United States Department of Agriculture and NRCS. As a leader for the tribe, I am sensitive to leases with the federal government. If you can understand, not to get too deep into it, but if you've heard of mitigation banking, that is a relationship where, let's say Walmart's gonna build a wetland, and I do have opinions about this too. They're gonna build a building in a wetland, forgive me. And of course, that's where you should build a Walmart. And often that is where they build a Walmart, because you can't build a house there or a school or something, but you can put a Walmart there. So then you need to build a wetland somewhere else to replace that wetland. But can we replace a wetland? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
No, we can't replace a wetland. But to do that, you have to go through a process called mitigation banking, which involves exchange of money. So we're gonna pay to be able to build in this wetland, and then land that you then replace, so that the new fancy wetland over here is gonna be banked and held in lease with the United States Department of Agriculture till the end of time. And there's a lot of things that go into this, and I'm not probably explaining it perfectly, but it's important that, you know, as a land manager for a tribe, I be sensitive to tying up land permanently with the federal government or for very long periods of time. But yet, we wanna have that healthy relationship with the NRCS and what they can offer us in land management and partner with them. So the tribe has just a small amount, about 160 acres of organic crops right now that is just set aside, land that's to be developed, roughly 1,600 acres of conservation reserve, which is absolutely, it's beautiful, it's important for wildlife. It takes a lot of management. You cannot just plant a prairie and then walk away from it. And so what I'm describing to you when I describe the woods and the prairies, and that is the work that our Land and Wildlife branch of the Department of Natural Resources, they are doing that field work day in and day out. And wow, it's almost 12:30. Day in and day out to manage the land effectively. We do a lot of mechanical work to avoid chemical use. This is the tribe's land in Palo Alto County. That is roughly 800 acres. That is an interesting story. So those of you that are married will understand that opposites often attract, and this land is indicative of that. A woman who was a widow wanted to leave this land to the Iowa Department of Natural Resources in the late 80s. And understandingly, you do have to, public lands do have to be open to the public. And she wasn't interested in that. She wanted it set aside as a preserve for no hunting or trapping. And so she reached out to the Meskwaki Nation and did leave this land to the Meskwaki people. And as you can see, the ponds on it, those are actually her husband. He mined that land for sand. Did you guys see that river?
Mm-hmm.
That's the Des Moines River.
Oh.
So interestingly, the Meskwaki Nation owns rights to the Des Moines River. And what do we know about the Des Moines River? And nitrates.
Yes.
So that leads me into the tribe's water quality standards. We are in process right now. They're with the EPA. I submitted them on July 7th. Water quality standards for the Iowa River, which I urge you to go to the Meskwaki Nation website, and if you go to Department of Natural Resources, you'll be able to see those standards. They are considerably more stringent than those of the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. This has been a long process for this department. I would say going on 10 years. The Meskwaki Nation is saying to you, their neighbors, you have a right to clean water. We have a right to clean water, and we're gonna go get it for everyone on the Iowa River. And so what's interesting is, to me, is perhaps the ability to do that on the Des Moines River, and what that would mean to the city of Des Moines below that, and thousands and thousands of Iowans. So those standards on the Iowa River mean that I think it's 47 municipalities above the tribe will have an opportunity, because of those standard requirements, to receive funding from the federal government to make upgrades and things that they need to do to their systems in order to protect discharges into the Iowa River. And I think it's, to me, I can't even really explain in terms as a natural resources manager what that means to be able to work in this manner. So I hope that impresses upon you when I say I would never be able to do this kind of work anywhere else in Iowa, and perhaps in this nation, frankly, in this day and age. There are roughly 570 federally recognized tribes in the United States of America. About 270 of those are in Alaska. Alaskan tribes do not own any land, and they have almost no land reserved to them. They do not live on reservations. They live in little villages that are really small. And I'm sure you can understand, what do we all know about Alaska? What was the plan there to make sure the tribes, frankly, had no right to what was under the land? So the Alaskan tribes, in my opinion and observation from work I've gotten to do there, the genocide is still occurring upon the Alaskan tribes. I don't think that will ever end, frankly. And it's very concerning and very disturbing, and it is about controlling oil and other mining rights and things of that nature. So there are roughly 47 federally recognized tribes that have water quality standards at this time in the United States of America. Tying into the standards is that the tribe's land is predominantly in trust with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. This map shows, this is again the land in Tama County. The green is in trust with the BIA, the red is in process. Generally, lands, as the tribe procures them, are always in process of being put into trust. It's a pretty slow process, and the current presidential administration at any given time, not perhaps the current one, impacts, they make policy changes regarding how complicated it is or isn't to get land into trust. So when in trust with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, that's like any trust relationship. A lot of large farming families have trusts, to just ensure that land stays available to the community or the family till the end of time. So the Meskwaki people are fully supported by the Meskwaki tribe. The tribe owns the homes they live in, helps, plows their snow in the winter, doesn't mow their lawns, but maintains the homes with a very robust government operations of departments, 29 departments that support that and work in workforce development to that. So the Meskwaki people are maintaining their own facilities and homes as well. So the land in Palo Alto County is not in trust. This is just a quick photo of all the land that is in prairie or conservation preserve. So you can see the prairies in the river bottom and flanking the woodland areas to also help protect water quality. And that's kind of the end of my rudimentary slides. But my favorite part of speaking is always question and answer, because I can go on forever with facts, but it's more fun when you guys ask me what you want to hear and and we can have conversations. So let's go into that.